Hello chess friends and welcome to easily.The channel and welcome back to our 150 attack series. So in this series I'm going to show you a very nice and effective weapon, how to beat the modern defense, how to beat the Pirc defense, and today we'll start a different line that is possible in the 150 attack. Today we'll start a very nice positional idea by Black. Black can play many times in order to escape many tactical threats. The move Rook to E8. I'll explain you of course what's all about, what is the most important idea about this move, but of course there are good methods for white how to even counterplay this types of ideas, and I guarantee you, if you are 150 attack player, if you're trying maybe to beat the Pirc or modern defense in the 150 attack way, I guarantee you many times you see this Rook to E8 and many times maybe you don't know the best continuation. So that's why we're trying to solve now also this lines in this particular video. So let's see now again what is the 150 attack and how we should counterplay this early Rook to E8 ideas by Black. So okay, our first move is the move D4, and again I'm pointing out, please check out my series from the beginning if you have trouble maybe to play against this modern or Pirc defenses. Really try the series from the beginning, because maybe some of your problems will not solve in this particular video. So as I said, you should really watch them from the beginning, part 1, part 2, part 3 and so on. So here after move D4, Black's response is knight to F6. We play knight to F3, G6, so going maybe even in the King's Indian. When we play of course C4, then of course even the Greenfield is possible. So that's why our continuation is now the move knight to C3, going into the classical Pirc defense. So we have here D6, E4, bishop to G7, and now we're going again into the 150 attack setup. We want to play bishop to E3, queen to D2, then of course bishop to H6. As usual, trade off the bishops, H4, H5, maybe open the H file, and then maybe create the queen and rook battery and deliver checkmate. So that is actually the main strategic and tactical goal here for white. Of course, as I mentioned before, not many games by white are won with this method, but that's your own, that's your most important plan. And at least in chess, you have to have sort of a plan. If you don't have a plan, I guarantee you will probably lose the game, because at least in the 150 attack, you know what you're doing, you know where to attack, you know how to attack, and you know where to place your pieces. That's I think also a beautiful thing about the 150 attack. So in the continuation, of course, your opponent will castle. We play queen to D2, and now comes this Rook to E8 method. So you can say nothing special, dude. This is nothing special going on. What's the beauty about this move Rook to E8? Well, there is a certain problem about this Rook to E8, because many times in the 150 attack we want to play, as I said, bishop to H6, and in this line it's not so good, because your opponent could go here and play simply bishop to H8, but actually your opponent doesn't have to even play the game like this. If bishop to H6 happens, then Black can, I think, go into a solid line and equalize the game immediately with the move E5. And okay, here after move bishop to H8, I think you can still play H4, H5, and this will be a dangerous game. But now with the move Rook to E8, actually Black solves a different problem. Black can immediately push the pawn on E5. And look at this. For instance, if E5 happens, okay, we can play maybe D takes E5. After D takes E5, and what we're hoping for now, okay, queen to D8, Rook to D8, okay, the bishop is hanging. We take out now the bishop 2 here on G7, okay, now we take out the pawn, and we are saying, okay, this is enough, I have now an extra pawn. But that's exactly what's the problem about this line. Black can counterplay your idea here, because Rook to E8 can be played, and even if you play F4, this is the only way maybe to stay with the knight a little bit longer on the E file. Actually, knight to D7 is going to happen, and look at this. You can maybe even try to push this position, but actually Black can get out of this mess. Although Black will probably lose the pawn on C7, but that's not a huge problem. Here, look at this, knight to C7, but now it's Rook to E7, and now suddenly also the knight is hanging. You have to now develop yourself here from white's perspective, because look at this, the king is on the E file, and now suddenly Black will take over in the position. Knight takes E5, F takes E5, Rook to E5, and look at this. Even if you castle, okay, knight to E4 it's still not a threat, because maybe rook to e1 will happen and then you have some tactical problems. But now with bishop to d7, things get really unpleasant, I think, here for black, because the knight is a little bit out of game. So it's now, I think, a weird position. You have to play even some ideas of a4, but now finally I think black can take out the pawn and has even maybe a slightly better position. I think it's equal, so we don't want to get out of our 150 attack in equal position. We want to get a winning position. So that's why I think here you see this bishop to h6 in the beginning doesn't make sense. So let's go back. After move rook to e8, what we want to prevent is this move e5. So that's why we have to play a little bit different move order. If you have followed my series so far, we've played many times this move bishop to h6 as an early method, even with the king in the center. Sometimes we had really the possibility to stay a little bit longer with the king in the center, and we played just the move bishop to h6. But now we have to prevent e5. That's the most important defensive goal here by black. So that's why we play queenside castling. And okay, look at this. Of course, if the e5 happens now, then of course d takes e5. You can maybe take, but look at this. The queen is hanging on d8. So this is not possible anymore, because we have now a beautiful battery on the d file. So you could maybe try this aggressive method, knight to g4, but it's not helping you, because bishop to g5 is going to happen. You have to play something like queen to d7. We'll simply take out another pawn, and I think white is winning the game for sure. So okay, let's go back. So after queenside castling, we see that e5 at least is not working anymore, and that's now the most important thing about the 150 attack. So we have now still our setup. We still castle queenside. We still have the flexibility here to attack the position with h4 h5. But now of course your opponent could try maybe this method. Your opponent could try now the move bishop to g4, and this is now, I think, the most unpleasant move for white here. And actually from this point on, you have to know what you're doing. So other possibilities here for black are knight from f to d7, c6, maybe to launch a flank attack and maybe to get the queen out, and also this move bishop to g4. So in the continuation of the video, we are analyzing now these three methods. So here in the continuation, let's see what happens if bishop to g4 happens. There is also bishop to e2 is here perfectly fine, but I like many times in the 150 attack the more direct way, the more aggressive way, because 150 attack is pretty an aggressive method. So if you don't play it aggressively, then I think you could get just a solid position, and you don't want to get a solid position out of the 150 attack. You want to get a beautiful position. So that's why we have to push here the pawn on e5, and this creates really madness, because in the near future maybe your opponent could try the move e5, and as we said, he could create a blockade, he could paralyze a little bit the center. Now with the move e5, after d takes e5, we play d takes e5. Okay, it seems so that something went wrong in white's attack, because the queen is now off the board, and that's exactly what we want to sometimes avoid in the 150 attack. But look at this, after rook to d2, okay, knight to d7 can be played, and now comes a very important move, knight to d5, and that's now a move that cannot be prevented here anymore by black. Look at this. Even if you try rook to c8, you get knight to e7. If you try knight to a6 to cover c7, you get here bishop takes a6 followed with knight to c7. So the only way to prolong the game is here to play bishop to f3. The g takes f3 doesn't make sense, because bishop to e5 will happen, and now you don't have any more the attack against the pawn on c7. So you have to play knight to c7 immediately. Still the rook is hanging, still the knight is hanging. Now in the continuation, your opponent could try. This is everything pretty much forced now in this particular line. Now we take out the rook. Okay, your opponent can escape, but now look at this, we can also take out this pawn, and suddenly the knight can escape, and this is now the most important thing. So even if your opponent tries maybe bishop to h6, there is now a beautiful method if you want to study even this line so deep. There is even a wild method how to get out of this mess. Actually, you can even sacrifice the rook back. You can play here simply e6, because this pawn is weak anyway, but at least by pushing it to e6, we're creating a new tactical madness. And now look at this, bishop to d2. Okay, queen takes d2. Okay, you have another pawn, but I guarantee you this is now perfect position for white. White continues knight to b6, knight takes b6, bishop to d6, b6, and we have now beautiful position where white is the bishop pair, and it's an unbalanced sort of pawn structure. Okay, still black has 5 pawns, but look at this, these 2 pawns are weak, this pawn is weak, so now we just push pawns here on the queen side with the support of the bishop pair. I think it's a perfect game. We just play f3, of course. We don't want to lose the g2 pawn, then something like, I don't know, bishop to d3, then rook to a1, and just we're pushing this pawn. So as I said, this is a really wild method. I think you have to be familiar with this line. So as I said, bishop to g4 can be played very early by your opponent. Now we play e5 because here it's very important to recognize that your opponent didn't play knight from f to d7, so he still has some tactical problems on the d file because the queen is not connected to this other rook, because we have here still this battery on the d file, and your opponent has to react after d takes e5, d takes e5. Your opponent has to take out now the queens, but now when the queens are off the board, suddenly this pawn becomes a weakness. So really stunning tactics. So of course we play knight to d5, pardon me. So as I said, let's go to a different line. Your opponent could play, of course, doesn't have to necessarily play this bishop to g4. So again, let's see this 150 attack. Let's go to the similar position, and I found really cool game in the database. It's Gennady Zaichik against Vladimir Zimin. Here the game went wild after a couple of moves, but I really wanted to show you this game because it shows again the weakness on c7 when the queens are off the board, or when the queen on d8 is not protecting anymore the c7 square. So in this particular line, the c7 is again a structural weakness. So here in the continuation, rook to e8, again queenside castling. So here Zaichik played also this very beautiful method. So now comes knight from b to d7 instead of this move g4. So now you can guess the next best move. It's again e5, because e5 is a very important method. It's very important breakthrough, because again, if you play too passively here, then your opponent could maybe block the center with the move e5, and okay, d takes e5. Look at this, knight to e5, knight to e5, rook to e5. Maybe you can play f4. It's here, but look at this. This pawn is weak. Knight to e4 is going to happen. Knight takes e4, rook to e4. So as I said, it's not so easy to pull off anything if you don't play e5 immediately. So that's why here very cool move by white, e5. We have here knight to g4 attacking now the bishop, and here bishop to f4 was a very interesting idea, because after knight to b6, look at this, even if you try d takes e5, d takes e5, still, as we said, you didn't made your connection with this rook with the queen. Now look at this, you can maybe just prolong the tactic, but you will eventually lose the queen here on the d file. So it's not possible for opponent to take out the pawn. So that's why here after move bishop to f4, knight to b6 was played, but now h3. And again, Black found really cool ideas how to get out of this tactical mess. Black played d takes e5, we have d takes e5, queen to d2, we have rook to d2, and now bishop to h6. Everything is must move here for black, but actually bishop to h6, knight to h6, again the same problem we have here. Knight to b5 comes now instead of knight to d5. In our previous analysis we have seen knight to d5, but again the most important thing to recognize is that the c7 is weakened. Now we're threatening again the beautiful fork here. So as I said, it's a brilliant method here to trade off the queens and go for the c7, and now from this point on you have a completely winning endgame here. So in the game, Zaichik Zimin tried rook to b8, the knight to c7, the rook has to escape, and now g4 by Zaichik, a beautiful move, not allowing to get this knight into the game. Here after a6 he played knight to d5, simply trading off the pieces. We have here rook to d2, and now with bishop to e2 everything is glued together, everything is compact. The evaluation is here about +2 for white. So really good method how to go into a simplified endgame. So okay, let's go now to a different line, to a different idea here for black. So again we're going into the 150 attack after move e4, bishop to e3, queen to d2. Again we're playing bishop to h6. So now your opponent is trying again rook to e8 in order to break with the move e5. So we are castling queenside again, and now your opponent could try c6. So I think it's a decent idea because b5 is the main goal, then to go maybe even b4, then of course to attack the pawn e5. Here I think e5 would be simply too rushed after d takes e5. Look at this, d takes e5, now queen takes d2, queen takes d2, and now after knight to g4, this is not a good position anymore. Suddenly I think after this one, bishop to f4, knight to d7, maybe you can again try some ideas after e5 e6, but I don't think that white gained so much here. F takes e6. Okay, you can maybe attack, but now with knight to f8, this is something that I think black can hold. h6 will happen, so the knight will be kicked away from this very active square on g5. So as I said, in my opinion, nothing special if you play e5 now in this position. So here after move c6, now we can actually go into our bishop to h6 method, because we have a fully control of the d file. As we said, still there is no connection. Now e5 of course doesn't make sense, because now the tactic from the beginning is not working, because d takes e5. Look at this again, the queen is hanging. So that's now the most important thing here to recognize. So after move bishop to h6, what your opponent could do is, of course, to escape with bishop to h8 to get out of the range, and that's also a certain beauty about this move rook to e8, because if you would have your rook on f8, then of course bishop to h8 is not possible, because white would probably immediately take out the rook on f8. So that's why here after move bishop to h8, you can immediately again launch our common flank attack in the 150 attack. And there are now, I think, two good moves here for black. Black can play knight to g4 and can also play bishop to g4. So let's see bishop to g4. After bishop to g4, here rook to e1. Very important move, because first of all, we're getting out of this tactical mess on the d file, but we are also, pardon me, on the long diagonal here, but we are preparing again the move e5. And now your opponent could maybe try bishop to f3, g takes f3, and now he could probably again try to lock the position with the move e5, but actually we can immediately play our common 150 attack, beautiful tactical move h5. And look at this, your opponent could maybe play knight to h5, rook to h5. Okay, we have here e takes d4, we play knight to e2, and your opponent could probably take out now the rook, but look at this, now knight to d4, we'll play bishop to c4, rook to g1. Again, I think the king is naked, so I think you have fun while playing this game. So really good again tactical possibilities here for white. So let's go back. After move bishop to h6, here your opponent, and after bishop to h8, h4, could also try the move knight to g4. So it's, I think, also a decent method, but now again we should play with the move h5. Okay, maybe you lose your dark square bishop. After queen to h6, your opponent can maybe kick away again the queen, but now we stay active and we play simply queen to f4, where we have opportunities to play knight to g5. But again, I think the most important thing is here the move e5. If your opponent plays e5, then of course d takes e5. Okay, takes, but look at this now. Okay, you can maybe take out the queen, but of course you lose also the rook. So this is again not working. So after move queen to f4, what your opponent could try is this normal b5 attack, but it's simply too slow. We simply take h takes g6, h takes g6, and as we said, e5. And there is only one way maybe how to defend this position, to maybe include the queen into the game and try to trade off the queens, try to simplify the game. But as I said, simply normal development, bishop to d3, queen to g4, and we don't have to trade off the queens. That's the beauty. We're not allowing here black to simplify the game, because we are on the attacking side. We want to complicate things, and as I said, we are the one that are playing the 150 attack, so we're not we don't want to simplify the position. So here the continuation, bishop to f5, maybe queen to h7. Look at this, you're already there, so it's really a messed up position already for black. So let's go back. After move bishop to h6, so we have seen now this possibility is bishop to h8 followed with bishop to g4 and knight to g4. But let's go to this new line where your opponent will play bishop to g4 again immediately. So these are different ideas, but many times your opponent is trying, as I said, simply to take out the knight, which is controlling the e5 square. He wants to make his e5 goal. That's now the most important thing. Now what we should do is here to take bishop to g7, king to g7, and now we should play here bishop to e2. And this is now a good method, because if your opponent plays too early, here bishop to f3, then we can take out with bishop to f3, and look at this, we have now a beautiful possibility to launch immediately g4, h4, h5 attack. So I think with the support of the bishop on f3, okay, maybe this bishop is a little bit paralyzed by its own pawn on this diagonal, but we don't want to attack this queen side anyway. We want to attack the king side now. So now with the support of the bishop, you have fun for sure, and you just push the pawn. So let's go back. After move bishop to e2, your opponent doesn't have to maybe immediately take out the knight. He can play something like, I don't know, knight from b2 d7, but now we play e5 again. Whenever you see that the queen is covered, sort of, then it's time to play the move e5, because we're not risking to trade off the queens. We only wanted to trade off the queens when we had like in the previous examples, when we had the opportunity to play knight to d5 or knight to b5, when we could take the pawn on c7. But now your opponent covered again the d file, so there is no threat of trading off the queen, so that's why e5 is possible. D takes e5, d takes e5, and again your opponent has to play a passive move with the knight. But now you look at this, the queen is coming into the game, and here your opponent could maybe try to block out the position, but look at this, bishop to h3, pardon me, h3, attacking the bishop. After bishop to f3, there is even a brutal line. You can play even move e6 here. You then have to even take the bishop immediately. Okay, let's see, your opponent takes, we take out also now the bishop on e2. Your opponent maybe can take, but look at this, with knight to f4, the game is over. There's not a good way anymore to protect the pawn on g6. We still have the tension on the d file, so it's, I think, a completely winning endgame here for white. So as I said, this was the analysis after move knight from b to d7. What your opponent could do is again prepare maybe this e5 with the move queen to c7, but now we kick away the bishop to f3, again bishop to f3. Okay, your opponent can have fun finally he blocks out now the center, but now again we, as I said, push the pawn g4, h4, h5, and here you have fun for sure. Your opponent could maybe block out, but we just push the pawn further. Maybe he wants to get out of this mess by playing move knight to d7, but now a very important move can be played, knight to e2, where we can maneuver the knight here, maybe even to g3, and then we can play a very interesting tactical shot, knight to f5, where the position gets open, then rook to g1. Look at this, this could be, I think, a brutal attack. So this is not working. So as I said, queen to c7 is not working. Maybe your opponent could try in this particular position knight to a6 to get out of this mess. Still we cannot play, of course, e5, but bishop to a6 doesn't make sense, because then the b file will be open. That's something that we're trying to avoid. We don't want to play the game like this, but actually again we should just play h3. We're waiting, bishop to f3, bishop to f3. Again your opponent can play maybe the move e5, but again we're playing the move g4, h4, and h5. So okay, this will be it for today. I hope you understood this possibilities of this 150 attack. Let's go back. The most important thing here, as we said, after move rook to e8 is then to castle queenside. From this point on, your opponent has several choices. The ideas can be knight to d7, but you know, whenever your opponent is covering the d file where there's no threat of the trades of queens, then we should push the pawn on e5. When your opponent is playing this very annoying bishop to g4 move, then we play e5 to get out of this mess. But now when the queens are off, then of course this is a tactical problem, knight to d5, the pawn on c7. Though this was this one, and here we have this method when your opponent is playing the move c6, which is in many occasions simply the best move. When no knight to d5 or knight to b5 are working, then still we can go with bishop to h6, and we have seen now this method with bishop to h8, but also with this early bishop to g4. So okay, I hope that you like this analysis. This is, I think, a very important analysis of our 150 attack, because you face many times these ideas. If you don't know what you're doing, you could get in positional problems, or you could get, I think, sort of a too solid position for black where no threats are possible for you. So this is, I think, a good way to go, where you can have fun and of course attack your opponent's kingside immediately. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more about the 150 attack, please check out my whole series from the beginning, so part 1, part 2, part 3, and so on. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.